Hi everybody, welcome. It's lovely to be here again. This is Claire Hedin, and I'm talking to you on the Artist Becoming Human or Really Fabulous Claire channel, the podcast. Today I have this sort of pressing need to talk with you, even though you can't talk back. I still imagine that you are here and that we're talking in real time about conversations, actually, and about how to have a good conversation. I don't know if I just got lucky, but when I was growing up, I was the youngest of four, and I also had a parent. One of my parents was another generation older than the other. So we spanned between us, I think, 3 generations, because there was someone maybe in their 70s, someone in their 40s, and then someone in their 20s. And we were quite a social family. So there were events that we'd go to or host. And as the youngest, my brother and I, because he was young with me, the two of us would hand out little nibbles, right? If it was a cocktail party or something. That gives you a bit of a sense of my background, in my early years at least. And we would just listen. And then even as we were growing up, being the youngest, being a child, it was very much in England about listening. Just listening and noticing the conversation, observing, and then finding a way to engage people, to engage with people. So the very first premise of the conversation was, in fact, the listening part, not the talking part. I'm excited to actually remember that out loud, because I think I was wondering, where does this frustration come from today's experience of a conversation? So today I had a conversation with somebody, and contextually, I want to just say that it was someone I don't think I've spoken to for a very long time, but we know each other from the same environment, which is a musical environment, both performers. And also both interested in spirituality and consciousness. But we're quite different ages, and maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe our gender difference has something to do with it too. We're both white, but he is beyond middle age, and what's the other part? Well, male, right? So here I am, female, and there I am in this conversation with him. And I think I called him, but before I knew it, I was under this sort of barrage of him just talking and 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 talking about himself. Non-stop. He talked non-stop about himself for a number of minutes. And at no point did it seem to occur to him that I wasn't there to be his audience. It didn't seem to occur to him to be interested in me, myself, and anything I might have been experiencing along the lines of the subject that he was talking about. And so there was no actual interaction. And I found this rather irritating and a bit boring, let's be honest, because if I'm watching Netflix, then I don't expect to be talking because I'm being entertained. But if you're going to do a monologue whilst we're meant to be in a conversation, please at least be entertaining. But no, this was simply a lot of boasting, a lot of gesturing, talking about all the things he's been doing, all the things people bring to him. And when I tried to interact, I sort of had to interrupt him, and I said, "Oh yes, I've noticed how much you do. I see you post online about all the work that you're doing. How do you all the work that you're making happen. That's what I said. And it was really unexpected, because his reaction to that was to immediately defend the idea that he had anything to do with making anything happen. So his first response was, oh, I don't make anything happen. I let it happen. And I felt the spiritual hierarchy in a flash. I'm like, oh my goodness. Here's a person that needs his audience to know how humble he is and how in accordance with the universe he is, even though he doesn't know how to listen, which, as far as I can understand things, is a prerequisite for being in harmony with the universe and with one's environment. So he doesn't make things happen, which of course is very aggressive, although he does make the conversation happen the way he wants to, but that was not being noticed. So then the other thing that happened was that I was talking to him to interject with a comment about myself, because I realised that if I were to wait for him to ask me something about myself, that the conversation would have ended before that could happen, because it wasn't going to happen. And I'm like, okay, so now I have to do the thing I don't really like doing, which is self-promote. Like, I have to announce something about myself. And so I mentioned to him, that I'd been doing a lot of singing, obviously, because that is something I do a lot of. And I said, yeah, so I said, and my singing is particular to healing. That's the focus. And I don't know if I even got to the end of that very sentence before I got an interjection, and perhaps what might be seen as another correction. And in that interjection, he said, oh, I don't call myself a healer. No, I wouldn't do that. No. Other people might. They might say something about me being a healer or me having done some healing. But I don't call myself a healer. That's a lot of responsibility, and I just don't think it's like, he basically said he didn't think it was appropriate. And I thought to myself, oh, he said, I like to clear people's bells. Like, I like to clear people with my music. And then if healing happens, then all well and good. And I thought to myself later, of course, the best thoughts come after the ideal moment sometimes, don't they? And I thought to myself, you know what? If you were an electrician and someone called you up and said, could you please come and sort out our wiring? You're an electrician, right? Are you a licensed electrician? Or even just an electrician? In his perception of things, he would have to say, oh, no, let's not go giving labels to things. No, I fiddle around with knobs and switches, and sometimes lights go on. So if you'd like to hire me based on that, I feel quite comfortable with that. And then that other person's meant to decide whether or not their well-being is in good hands. So there is something to me in this new ageness. So this podcast kind of seems to have two prongs. One is to do with how to have a conversation that's fair and balanced and inclusive. But the other is to do with this pretentiousness of avoidance of responsibility that seems to be rife in new ageness. And maybe only in certain demographics of new ageness. That part I don't really know. But I used to have a similar fear, and it was a lack of confidence for me. Not being willing to say, yeah, I'm a healer. But it's really just a pragmatic statement. It's like, yes, I'm a healer, as opposed to, yes, I'm a sailor. Or, yes, I'm a delivery truck driver. I don't deliver stuff in trucks, and I do sail, but not as a sailor. I sail with others. So, all that being said, I just thought, why are you making it seem like to say you're a healer is something beyond? Because to be honest, to be dialed in to the activities of energy is something we can all do. It is not a privilege, and it is not a hierarchical entitlement. You're not saying anything about yourself that is somehow better than someone else. to acknowledge what you do. Maybe you're a ritualist. Maybe you're a therapist, right? These things all have names. They have names so we know what we're referring to. That is all. We don't have adjectives in front saying, I'm the best effing therapist, or I am an insurpassably good sailor. No one can beat me at healing. Like, that's not what we're saying, is it? We're just saying, identify yourself and be seen. So there we have it. That's the second point. And then this other piece, which is the experience of being in a conversation where the other person isn't asking you questions. And this does happen mostly with men or overly ambitious women. I say overly ambitious only in the sense that if someone is so ambitious that they no longer can fathom connection with somebody else, then I would say that's overly ambitious, and that's regardless of whether you're male or female. But I think maybe I said that with regards to female just because women tend to be naturally educated to be better listeners and better conversationalists. We are in the art of drawing things out of people and being interested in people and allowing that curiosity to weave itself into a conversation. The downside of that is that men are not equally trained to do the same. So if a woman is in the position of listening, which is what I tend to do anyway, in any situation, I like to kind of get familiar with the setting before I commit into it or introduce something into it that might need fine-tuning, appropriateness. But men don't seem to have that. And so they'll just kind of launch in. And this has happened for God knows how many thousands of women over the years. If you're on a date, for instance, if you ask a man a question, he will talk and then he will carry on talking and carry on talking. And unless he has a good balance of social education, social awareness, curiosity and interest in who you are, this person that's sitting there in front of him, eating with him, then he will carry on talking and you won't get asked anything. And I have sat through things like that. And I mean, thank God for imagination, because really all you can do is wander off in your imagination until the ordeal is over. Or you can do the, God forbid, direct thing of saying, would you like to know anything about me? Are you interested in getting to know me? I would love you to ask me some questions about myself. And actually that would be a really good way of doing it, because it's quite straightforward and who knows how it would be received. It's worth doing. Maybe I'll try that next time. But the trouble is when someone hijacks the conversation and leaves you in the role of listener, it can be hard to break out of it. And partly because I think for me, when this happened today, there was a certain amount of perhaps shame around even wanting to be involved. And also because the conversation was incessant, like he literally didn't breathe, where was I meant to interject? So there's that. The only other thing I want to mention is that there is such a thing as hierarchy in conversation itself, and I'm talking about levels of consciousness. And there is a video that I did about this quite a long time ago, spontaneously. And I saw these kind of concentric circles that expanded outwards as they rose. So if you imagine a diagram where you've got a smaller circle at the bottom of a page and then a slightly larger circle above it by maybe an inch, and then an inch above that, a larger circle, and then it just kind of radiates outwards. And at the very bottom of the conversation ladder, if you will, is debate. And that, I would say, is like the lowest level of conversation, although we may have just discovered another one today, now I think about it. Perhaps that would be called monologue. Maybe that goes underneath all of it. Monologue in a conversation with somebody. But the debate is pretty much as it sounds, where you each have information, and really your goal is to win, is to make sure the other person understands just how right your information is and just how irrelevant theirs is. So that's debate. if you can shift up to a more inclusive, gentler, perhaps more feminine, that's something to think about, receptive mode, both parties, then you get into something that might be more around dialogue or discovery. No, dialogue or discussion. That was it. Dialogue or discussion. And that's where you're actually interested in what each other's bringing to the conversation, because you want to further your learning and you want to make sure that what you think you know is verifiable with someone else. And is it accurate, or could it be adjusted a bit to make it more accurate? So there's a genuine curiosity. So I already gave you a sneak peek into the third level, which is not debate and it's not discussion or dialogue. It is in fact discovery. And that is, I would say, the alchemical level, where the subject matter has transported you as the participants into a new understanding of yourselves and a new awareness of yourselves from this perspective of consciousness. And it's obviously a very exciting level to be at. Now, I can see a world where those are actually upside down, and so that all conversation starts with this intentional discovery listening mode together, which would be kind of like Bohemian dialogue. And then from there, you start to exchange information that's coming into you, which could be a sort of debatey, discussion-y type thing. Well, actually, it'd be more the discussion and the dialogue. And then at the very top of that is when you'd make decisions, and then you would refine things with more quantitative considerations, and that would be the debate. But it wouldn't be an aggressive debate as such. It would be a debate that is based on the feminine, in other words, collective, a collective decision making. So the D might switch into debate towards decision. Now, I like that. I think that's kind of an interesting model, and maybe I'll draw it out as a diagram, as is my wont. But I do want to thank you, listener, dear listener, for listening to me and for perhaps considering these things. So if you are a conversationalist, I applaud you. Help others learn to become better at it. And if someone is not good at it and you're enduring a monotonous monologue, then please prompt the other person gently that you would like to participate in the conversation, and how might we make that happen? And then again, those thoughts about, would you like to know something about me? Is there something I can tell you about me? What are you curious about? What made you want to come and have dinner with me tonight? Anything at all. Although that actually leans more towards them. It runs the risk then of them talking about themselves. So, equal conversation, be mindfully present. Let listening be a third person in the conversation. So it's not just tennis, back and forth, but actually more of an interactive, spatial awareness process that you do together. I hope some of this makes sense. It's a little zigzaggy, but it's not scripted. And so I really am just kind of speaking from where my mind is wandering, and I hope you enjoy it. And please do feel free to leave comments. Thank you so very much.
Hande